Today on Business Focus, we are taking advantage of the fact that we have once again got Ross, our CEO, in the Brisbane office. So I am going to corner him and hit him with a bunch of questions. We also have some interesting news when it comes to First Focus. So it's a bit of a multi-layered episode that we're going to have coming at you. Once again, Ross, welcome. Hello. Thank you for coming.
Hello again.
Yeah, cool. Number four. All right, look, I actually want to start with First Focus news. We had you on not that long ago talking about acquisitions. I think we're at number 7 then? Number 7?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And we're now at number 8. Do you want to give us a bit of a heads up on what's happened there?
Yeah, we just recently completed an acquisition of Lettscom in Adelaide, which adds to the previous one we did. Also in Adelaide, it was a big focus for us to really make sure we had a good presence on the ground there.
Okay.
And so, yeah, really excited. We've got a brand new office as well in the city. Adelaide's now a real big and meaningful part of our business, and really excited to, do more in that in South Australia.
Yeah, right. I know from a marketing perspective, we're going to be making a lot more noise in that market, really focusing on it. We've got a nice, unique blend of software and web development skills down there, all the skills you expect from an MSP as well now, with the combination of the two companies that we brought on board, and a really great team. I was down there with you last month. Yeah, last month.
Yeah.
To meet with a number of them, and just a really good vibe. Everyone's really bought into it, and I think it's that whole better together kind of a concept.
Yeah, and the same thing is, you can do all these acquisitions where the finances seem good, but ultimately, the people have to be great. And both the businesses down there, the thing that's made this work is that very, very aligned group of people.
Yeah.
Owners who in both cases are staying on as well,
that's
which
helpful.
is awesome. Yeah. And really buying into our overall vision of where we want to take First Focus and technology in general.
Great. In terms of that new office you mentioned, for people who actually know Adelaide, I don't. Where is that?
Light Square, which is just on the edge of the CBD.
Yeah.
So nice and convenient for our staff, customers. Really good spot, and
Cool.
glad we were able to give them a nice new office there, especially when you're bringing two businesses together. I thought it'd be nice to have a nice new home for us.
Until recently, the Brisbane office has had sort of the crown as the nicest one. Does that still hold true?
Look, we've
tighter?
been down a path of uplifting offices in every state, really. So Melbourne's also moved. Sydney's moving later this year. Fit out's currently underway. So
That does look fancy. That looks arguably better than Brisbane. And Brisbane's good.
It's part of the business growing up, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of, we've gone from C and B grade offices to real offices.
Well, I mean, part of having the best people is you have to look after them, right? And so giving them an environment that's nice to come into, that makes them feel like that our digs reflect our capability, I think, is a big part of it.
Yeah, capability, and that the world now expects that when you come to the office, it's there's a reason to come to the office, because otherwise you'd just be working at home.
Yeah.
And so I think that's continuing to change that office landscape just more broadly around designing offices that are suited to collaboration and giving people a reason to come instead of just working from their office at home.
Cool. Question 2 is, we had our annual offsite recently, which is our executive team. We go down to somewhere, I can't remember the name of it, down south of Sydney this time. We came out of that with a whole range of initiatives and plans for the year ahead. But before I ask you to take away, give the key takeaways for the customers listening, let's actually talk a little bit about the Gazelles method and the framework. I've got this book right behind me, which is sort of, at least in part, details that.
Yeah.
Give us the high level, the 101. What is it, and when did we adopt it, and how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, it was our 10th offsite.
Okay.
In that
My first.
using that your first in that Gazelles format, which means the output of that couple of days, or in this case it was 3 days. It gets longer every year, but the output of that event is the one-page strategic plan. Obviously, a lot of detail behind that, but that the lens for the scaling up users to create that plan, which is starting from that big picture, going down to your, through core competencies and values and purpose, through to your 5-year key thrusts and capabilities, down to your 1 year.
Yep.
And when we started this 10 years ago, we had this BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal we were going to try and reach. And I mean, as you know, the conversation we had this time is, hey, we're in the last 3 to 5 years now. We're at a sprint where
close.
it's actually tangible and within reach. And you know, when we said it 10 years ago, it seemed like a crazy goal.
Do you think people believed it was possible back then?
I don't think
no.
It's an interesting question, actually. I think it's not that we necessarily, there wasn't a doubt. It was just, it was so far away. It was almost like, wow, wouldn't that be great? And it was definitely an intent to head towards that. And that's the whole benefit of a plan like this, is the whole 20-mile march concept. It's like, well, you don't need to worry about the end of it. You just need to worry about what you're doing tomorrow, you know? And so, but the methodical repetition of that over, said now 9 years into our 10th year, has meant we're now in the, what we feel is about 4 years away from reaching our BHAG. Yeah.
Just, I was recently listening, I think it was to Radio National or something nerdy, and there was an interview about the whole 20-mile march, well, about a Munson, at which it all comes from, right?
Yeah.
And there's only 4 books written on a Munson, including the one written by the guy who was being interviewed there in that thing, but there's 1 million books written about Scott. And so you've got this chaotic, muddled, underprepared guy who gets all of this, and this brilliantly prepared, methodical man who just absolutely nailed everything he ever did. And it led on to the conversation around the best managers are boring. The best managers are able to just plan, implement, repeat, and just set to a cycle. And I think so much of that is what Gazelles is about, right?
Yeah.
It's the data, it's priorities, metrics, meeting rhythms, and then just absolutely sticking to it.
Yes, that's right. And not being swayed by the shiny lights that come, especially in our sector, right? Like there's always a shiny object. Just
AI.
AI. Oh, look, there's many.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that.
But you know, you set out a plan, and you have to be agile enough to adjust it, but disciplined enough to stick to it at the same time, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, that's where the whole the power of no comes in, right?
Yes.
It becomes a very, very important thing. Okay, off the back of that offsite, what should our clients and anyone who wants to work with us know about our plans for the year ahead? Like, what were the key takeaways?
Look, over the last couple of years, we've been, as you know, building this concept of this super green experience, which is comes from something we'd used through Gazelles, which was we had this, you know, green, amber, red, everything, and then we had these super green stretch targets. And I guess the idea was born of, what if everything was super green? You know, what would it look like? And so we've been building our whole business around that concept, and it's really now crystallized into the way we work. And so customer experience focus is what's underpinned last year, and to be honest, still this year as well, because our industry, you can do all the sales and marketing you want, but our industry very much is a trust-based relationship, and which means customers need to inherently believe that you are the right fit for them, and you're doing things in their, you know, for their good. But referrals and the network, and like that's core to how we're going to grow our business, not just how we're going to keep our existing clients, right? So we want to have the absolute best customer experience. We've been investing a lot in people, in software, in self-service, automation, but every single touch point in the journey from a customer, right from, you know, when they first ideally reach our website or see an ad or something like that, or hear about us, through the invoice they receive. We want to just keep improving each one of those touch points, remove friction, improve the experience. And so that's probably the big theme. And a lot of the other things we'll do around, you know, improving communication and, you know, and communication methods and, as I said, the automation, self-service, all the tools that we're bringing to the customers now to them to be able to get support faster. It's all back to that experience, right? So we know speed, like people want stuff, they want stuff now. We're in an industry where if something's broken, it's urgent. It's, you know, so I guess driving that fast response in every single part of our business.
Yeah, and a proactive response is the other thing we're really focused on, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can react fast, but ideally you want to not have to react at all. So yeah, lots of stuff behind the scenes. I think from what's going to be most visible to the customers is is the software and tools and self-service type stuff, right? Because they're the stuff we're doing, actually bringing information and technology and to their fingertips now through our app.
Yeah.
All within Teams, and we're really trying to change that experience for how people engage with IT.
Yeah.
People don't even want to call IT, right? Like they don't.
No, not ideally.
No, so we want to.
It's not a fun experience. People don't wake up in the morning and aspire to talk to
I
IT.
wish I can call help desk today, right?
Yeah.
So there's that, which is the really the core of what we do. But I think more and more, I know you wanted to touch on some of this, which is really around. Okay, cool. That's the basics. But now, how can we use technology to make your business better, right? How can we use technology to make you work better with your customers? I mean, I've been having some really, as we've been doing all this software development stuff around our own app, I've been having a few conversations with our clients like, it'd be cool if we could engage with our customers like that. And that's where we want to be helping, right? Not just keeping the lights on for you, but helping you do more.
Well, part of that probably comes into the breadth and depth of skills we've got internally too, right? That's been a big focus, is making sure that we've got essentially the ability not to just recommend and consult, but to build and deliver and manage and maintain and all that. Right. So that's probably a big focus as far as I can tell, at least for the year ahead, is we've got, as you mentioned earlier, right, with the Adelaide acquisition, not the most recent, but the one before, that brought on a whole range of new skills. And so it's about sort of being a company that can, as I said, basically just take you through that whole journey.
Yeah, I think we started using that language of everything you need, and everywhere you are. That's kind of our overall, almost company strategy in a sentence, right?
Yeah.
We want to be that full service offering, and technology is broad. It's hard to cover every single base a customer might need, but that's our goal for our core customer, for our market, which is where we service. They shouldn't need to go to anyone else, right? We should be able to help them no matter what they need.
Don't go anywhere else. That's the key message. So please, the challenge I think with those offsites, just going back a bit, is if what you're doing is working fundamentally, and yes, you can work better, things can work worse, but it's working. There's this tension between trying to do something too different and not make any change at all. Like, if you've got your annual priorities from the year before still stand somewhat true, hold up somewhat well, but you don't want to look like you went away for 4 days and came out with the same answers. So how do you kind of navigate between those two tensions?
Look, for me, it's not a tension because I'm always wanting to change. I mean, I'm not a status quo guy, right?
Yeah.
So I probably have the opposite challenges.
Not change too much.
Well, that's right. Actually holding back from the million ideas, right? So I think and again, maybe it's just it's a technology industry thing, but as soon as you're standing still, you're going backwards very fast. It's very easy for you to suddenly become the dinosaur in the room if you're not embracing the new stuff and bringing it to, I don't say to market quickly, because I don't like this idea everything has to be for profit necessarily, but it's how you embracing new ways of thinking, new ways of working, new technologies, new so there's always something new. And I don't know that there's and maybe it's because our business is evolving from a size perspective as well, and so you're having to continually kind of redo stuff that maybe was a good fit solution 3 years ago. Well, it's actually not good anymore when you're twice the number of staff. And so we're having, change is needed in order to even stay current.
Yeah, that's fair. And I'm just thinking though that sort of tension, or that there's almost like a dichotomy there of MSPs and technology businesses generally need to continue to evolve and adapt to get ahead, right? And yet we're seeing as an industry, excluding us, that AI is not being adopted widely by MSPs, right? That there's this, maybe it's a protection of revenue models, or maybe it's a lack of depth of experience or capability.
Yeah, I think, probably the most similar is the cloud change, where there was cloud's not going to work, on-prem servers, there was certainly a large cohort of people or companies in our industry that were anti-cloud, right? And some of it is because they made a lot of money from selling servers and they wanted to protect that. But it's just, because a lot of what we do, I think, is judged based on its uptime and how much it goes wrong, we tend to default to things we know work. And sometimes that means it actually prevents us wanting to try new things because it might be better in some ways, but what if it goes down? Or it's there's comfort in something that's worked for X amount of time, right? And so I think in general, engineers, obviously generalizing, but technical people, engineers are not ones to push boundaries. They want something that is solid and works every time, and they know how to deploy, and so. And you wouldn't want that with other engineers either. You want someone testing out a new thing when building a bridge, right? Like
if X then, if X happens, then Y might happen. Yeah.
So we're often the people that the IT. And if you look at a large enterprise business, IT is the department that says no to stuff, right? Because it doesn't work at scale. It's security, all the things, the reasons to say no. Instead of turning that into okay, but how could it work? Right? Okay, if we want to do that and that, how can we? So I think that, I mean, I has a good example that, as you said, that there's reasons why it's scary and security is a concern. Okay, but let's see with those things in mind, how do we actually use it? Yeah,
it's not binary. It's not if you do this, you can't worry about those. Yeah. It's very much a consultative.
That's right.
Conversation. Okay, with that lens, then. What I wanted to ask you about was you ingest a ton of data because you're directly involved in the creation of almost all monthly reports that go out to our clients. You also have more metrics on your dashboards than anyone ever. So looking, I guess, ahead at the rest of the financial year, or even just in general, let's do that lens. 12 months seems reasonable and you can work with that. What are the biggest, I'm going to try and be a positive person here, what are the biggest opportunities that businesses can look to take advantage of through tech, in your view, this financial year?
I think, and it's not just AI, I think more broadly, automation still has to be the number one area for investment. And sometimes it's using AI-based tools. Sometimes it is just automating processes, RPA, which is robotic process automation.
Thank you.
And other sort of business process kind of optimization. So a lot of stuff can be automated. A lot of applications now are written in a way that they can, open APIs, they can talk to each other. Yeah. And so I think there's a big opportunity for businesses to remove manual processing, remove the errors that can occur with manual processes. So that's from an efficiency perspective. But I know when we've done the automation stuff, there's an efficiency benefit, but actually there's a quality and consistency benefit and a customer experience benefit that comes along with that. And so I think that all those kind of digitizing of processes and digitizing of information and can allow you to make it more efficient, but can allow you to really do some cool things with making that information available to customers. And I know I've had some really good conversations with a couple of our clients around that, about, again, how they can make information more available to their users or their end clients rather. So that's probably the big area for me. I think that a lot of the other stuff is incremental, but really where the real big gains are automation and AI in terms of, as I said, both efficiency and customer experience.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more tech companies, vendors, MSPs, others, almost everyone, to be honest, talking a lot about EX, employee experience. And I think it's key because no one, as we said before, wakes up in the morning thinking, great, I get to call the help desk today. But they also don't go, can't wait to get stuck into Excel, like and manually enter column after column or whatever. Yeah. So I think as soon as you start to improve employee experience, you improve customer experience. The two are just inextricably linked.
That's right. Yeah.
So I think that it flows through. You're going to see benefits come through that whole chain.
Yeah, and for me, one of the biggest benefits can also come from that quality and consistency piece. I think, you mentioned Excel, it made me think of, I saw something earlier, it was like, you look at these big Excel spreadsheets and there's almost rarely you'll find a big Excel financial model or spreadsheet which doesn't have an error in it somewhere. And that idea of, there's errors in so many of the things we do, whether it's someone typing something from one thing to another, whether it's something's been copied to another cell in Excel, all these little areas where errors can creep in can really be fixed by technology. And I think that there's that drives into customer experience, right? Or not having to do rework and other things like that.
Yeah, okay. And the other thing there that you got me thinking about is those large models, if they're not automated, typically have a single owner. There's very
Yes.
rarely shadow resource on that stuff,
Yeah,
which
that's right.
immediately introduces a risk to customer experience, to
Yeah.
employee experience, etc.
Yeah.
And certainly efficiency.
Yeah, and so we're doing more and more now. As I said, I think the MSP's job of keeping servers running and making sure the firewall is patched, yeah, they're important, but actually making sure we are looking at the application layer, and making sure that we're helping the business be more efficient, be more error free, be improve their customer experience. Like that's really where our work is now.
Yeah, that other layer is essentially table stakes now.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Not to put a negative lens on it then. I mean, you can always turn opportunities or risks. You can turn the framing, but glass half empty on this one. Biggest risk. What do people need to make sure their business is addressing?
Yeah. The dark cloud of security
Yeah.
still hovers over us, right?
Yeah. I don't want to say it, but yeah.
Yeah, it's still the like you said, we've had the positive conversation. In some ways, security is seen as the negative conversation. It can be turned into a positive if you can be at the forefront compared to your competitors and actually are winning more business by being the secure one. But ultimately, it's legislation and compliance that's driving a lot of the change there, and it has to. We were too far behind, and as an industry, it's we have to be we have to grow up, right? Cybersecurity is very new. Everyone's kind of coming at it with the best intentions. Customers are getting better at knowing that it's a problem and exists. Like the conversation's changed compared to a few years ago where it's like, hey, there's this thing called cybersecurity. You need to watch out for it. Like we don't have to have those conversations anymore. But people still aren't necessarily making the investments they need to. And you are starting to see that if you're not doing what's reasonable in that space and something happens, it is going to start being
There are some very real world consequences.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's obviously, we've talked about this a lot. You can never be 100% secure and, prevent everything. And that's why insurance exists and other things, right? But it's definitely not okay to just be ignorant of the fact anymore and not know. And I think that's what's come out of these couple of big reports that have happened from the big breaches. It's like when you actually look at what they found, they weren't taking the time to look for these problems or to do anything about the alerts that were raised.
I was going to say there was a real complacency on the alerts, right? And it's are you seeing that the main barrier to compliance, I suppose, alignment, whatever you want to call it, but certainly to a point where you're investing enough time and resources into security is still cost, or is it actually that often the cost is being put in, but it's the actual application of the services that you're paying for? I
say cost is still the biggest barrier. I don't think there's too many organizations that are happy to pay more to secure themselves because it's just a cost until you would have got a breach or an incident or something that would have it's very theoretical. It's very abstract to say, well, I'm just going to pay money more for what, right? Yeah. So it's just like if your insurance bill doubles, you're going to go, well, what am I getting for this? It's very hard to actually understand paying for risk mitigation.
Is it almost that it is a per head calculation? The people there is as you grow, because it will scale. It's not like your house, I don't know, as you add more bedrooms doesn't get more expensive to insure or more bathrooms or whatever. Like, is it that kind of a concept? It needs to be factored into the per head cost of running a business?
Per head, yeah. I mean, you definitely should be. I don't say it's 100% linear, but it's 100% needs to increase. But the biggest thing is just the uplift in what was acceptable and what's now acceptable has shifted a lot. And cybersecurity, it actually goes to more than just the technology that you're running, right? There's a whole bunch. There's the governance side, the human side to it, the policies and procedures, making sure they're actually being followed. Because you can create a policy and a procedure, but that's what we've seen, right? It's doesn't matter if you've got it, if it's not followed even once or twice or three times, like you're creating a risk every time. So it's what in a paper world wasn't kind of, the job of just one department that sits over here. It was kind of everyone's job. Now, because it happens on a computer, it becomes the IT department's job or IT or MSP's job. That's where
whereas everyone's the risk, right? And that's the problem.
Yeah.
But I mean, your point about a policy or a procedure, I mean, you only have to look at, I don't know, a brand guideline from a marketing perspective to see how often someone in the business goes and looks at that.
Yeah.
It's tucked away and you're now, compliant and you've ticked that box. It's
interesting that, one of the things we talk about needing to be owned by everybody. I do presentations through like executive connection with groups of CEOs, and one of the first questions I always ask is who's responsible for cybersecurity in your organization? And most people will say, oh, yeah, I've got a MSP. And like, okay, but who in your organization is responsible ultimately? And they're like, oh, well, I guess it's me. I'm the CEO. Okay, but how much time are you spending per week on that? Well, none. Okay, so who's responsible for it?
Yeah.
And they're kind of getting this. There's this gap between, well, I'm responsible because I'm at the top, but I'm not actually doing anything about it. MSP is responsible because I'm paying an amount to someone. Therefore, it's and there's a real gap between those two. Somewhere, someone in the middle theoretically may be responsible, but no, I rarely have a situation where someone in the room has a good answer to that question and say, oh yeah, that person, and they have 0.2 of an FTE of time allocated for making sure the external vendor's doing their thing, for training people, for policy adherence, for improvement. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Okay, so if people take away one thing from today, it is who in your organization is responsible for cybersecurity, and if you say how much time are you actually allocating towards that each week?
Yeah, that's right.
And that's the catch. That one there. Okay. And to do what?
Yeah. And how is that person's manager, and this is the next, it's like if they have someone on their team, it's like, okay, how are you ensuring they're doing a good job? What's how do you know?
Well, you can't measure something you can't improve something you can't measure. So what are the expectations?
And so I think it's just so new for so many, especially, I said, big enterprise, maybe they've got some of this sorted, maybe, although we've seen not necessarily.
I mean, I would argue no.
But certainly in small mid-market, no one has a good answer to that question when I ask.
I think another key thing going right back to outcomes from our offsite is just a continued dedicated focus on ensuring that our posture is absolutely rock solid, because the first thing in trusting someone else look after you is that they're actually looking after themselves. Yeah. And we're very clear about that, and we're going to try and be a bit more vocal about that, set that trust and ownership up front. So the only other thing there you mentioned was the changing landscape compliance shifts. Yep. What's looming? What should people know about the changes likely this financial year, if any?
Look, the biggest thing is the expectation that there is now a level of expectation that if you're not doing the basics, there will be some ability for the commissioner to come after the organisation, and so there's the challenge at the moment is that even let's take paying a ransom as a good example. There's a grey around is that even legal or not, because the only legislation that exists around paying ransoms at the moment is actually more for kidnapping, right? And so they're kind of trying to apply. Yeah. At the moment, you've had to apply that legislation to a cybersecurity event, which is, am I allowed to give a criminal organization money? Yeah. Well, that legislation says I can if I'm under extreme duress, right? And so that's because you're actually allowed to pay money to someone if you've been kidnapped, right?
Yeah. So, but is financial duress, or is that relevant?
So it's an extreme example, but it basically there hasn't up till now been any reasonable legislation that exists to know what the expectation is to secure data, or your from a cybersecurity perspective. I mean, there's privacy legislation, but privacy is different again. But actually, to protect your data, your network, your organization, it's now been there's legislation kind of going through at the moment, which will make that a lot clearer.
Okay.
In terms of responsibilities, penalties, and what you can and can't do.
All right. Well, I'll make sure that as those changes come through or don't,
Might be another podcast episode there.
Absolutely. I think we'll
yeah.
absolutely do that. We'll wheel Dan in our security consultant at WA and get him to speak to it. Okay. I reckon that is a good update as to what we're up to, what people should be thinking about when it comes to tech and the risks they need to mitigate over the next 12 months or so. So we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much again for coming along and watching or listening, whatever you've chosen to do. But as always, if you have got ideas for a specific topic or some content you would like us to cover on the podcast, reach out to me directly on LinkedIn and I will be happy to make that happen, subject to exactly what you say. See you next time.